My husband and I met at a personal development workshop, and we were friends for months before it was no longer a friendship, before it moved romantic. And I knew he had kids from the beginning. I was running a preschool at the time. So, and his kids at that moment when I met them, ages 3, 2, and almost 1. So they were tiny little beings and ages that I felt incredibly comfortable with. I have an early childhood education background. I ran a preschool for 5+ years. That was my first job out of college, was working at a preschool. And I love that age group so much. So it was so natural to integrate in with them when our friendship was blossoming, and to spend time with these children and hang out with them and see what was going on. And what was actually quite interesting, because I had this background, and he's a dad, and right now a single dad, and doesn't have all the background and education and experience like I do. I've had more years. I've never parented a child, but I have so many more years of hanging out with this age group and knowing developmentally, what is in their best interest and what are the milestones that they should be at, and not just emotionally or psychologically or socially, but also like physically, like a 3-year-old shouldn't be drinking a bottle anymore and that sort of thing. So it kind of, I started integrating in quite early in the influence in their lives, and without the intentionality of potentially becoming a mother. That was not on my radar at the time. But our relationship shifted from friendship to romantic, and that really put me in a predicament, because I have step parents. I have a stepmother, I have a stepfather. I've written about that, my relationship in growing up in both those scenarios. There were some really great elements and some not so great elements in that relationship. And so that was a big part of informing whether or not I wanted to become a step parent for myself. And in that, I ended up actually ending our relationship, and we split up for a while, because the idea of me being a stepmom was something that I was really concerned about, because I didn't want to negatively impact their lives in any way. And I have my own unresolved stuff.
I'm hearing a couple things. First of all, I'm hearing this, like, based on your experience with step parents, that you feel this sense that being a step parent would negatively influence a child. But at the same time, one of the things that can be really tricky is the fluidity of parenting, and when you jump in, even with your friends' kids, right? When do you jump in and say no? When do you jump in and say, maybe this bottle isn't appropriate? When do you jump in and, be an adult relationship for them versus just like a fun aunt who happens to be nearby? And when do you put a boundary up and say, that's not my role? I'm not the parent. I'm not parenting right now. It sounds to me, if I'm hearing you correctly, that even as friends with your childhood development background, you were jumping in a little bit, and then the dating relationship complicated that further. That's interesting, because some of us might go the other way, just sit and wait in the sidelines until an appropriate time, like when you are dating, to jump in. So can you talk a little bit about that?
When I met the kids and during our friendship, it was like you're describing, the other more typical way of approach of, like, I'm here, I'm like Aunt Jenna, hanging out, all the fun, and bring toys and games, and we're just kicking it. We go to the beach and play around, and just being a caring adult, making sure like everyone's safe, but not playing a parental role. And when I was saying like the guardianship and all those things started creeping in, it was actually more just, I was telling their dad. I was like, hey, did you know that if at a certain point you don't want the mouth with the teeth and all the things to be sucking on a nipple of a bottle, because how that affects the teeth and all of that. And so I was like, just because I have this background, I can't not tell you these things. Take it or leave it, right? You're the parent. I'm not the parent, but I'm seeing things, and I can't not say when I'm seeing things that are flags for me that could hurt them, right? Hurt them. And so I just would be like, here, did you know? And here's a little thing, but not doing that directly at the kids or with the kids, saying like, oh, you can't have that anymore. I made sure that that came from the parent, not from me.
Thank you for listening to Stork'd with your host, Julia Carroll. This podcast is changing the conversation around the ways people define and create family. If you like what you hear, please support us by sharing with friends and following on Instagram at Stork'd_podcast. We also always appreciate it when you rate and review us wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. For more information, visit storkedpodcast.com to sign up for our newsletter. That's STORKD podcast.com.